Hey, and welcome to Think Like a Hacker. This week's interview is an amazing conversation I had with Carrie Wheeler, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Liquid Web, and we chatted at WordCamp Atlanta. Carrie actually came from a technical role or a technical position, and she transitioned into a leadership role and then ultimately into the C-suite. And of course, she works in the C-suite right now as Chief Operating Officer for Liquid Web. We had a really great conversation, and if you are in a technical role and you're interested in transitioning into a leadership role, she has some really great pointers for you. And if you want to ultimately transition into the C-suite, she has some guidance there as well. We chatted about that. We chatted about the nature of leadership. We chatted about some of the amazing things that Liquid Web are doing. Here is Carrie Wheeler at WordCamp Atlanta. So I'm chatting with Carrie Wheeler, the Chief Operating Officer of Liquid Web. Yeah. Who I was, Carrie, I was fortunate enough to meet you last night, thanks to Lindsay, who's sitting off camera over there. Thank you very much for the intro. And I'm dying to talk with you a little bit about your career path and what Liquid Web are doing and that kind of thing. How on earth did you get your start, and what was your journey to COO? I mean, it's a big question, but
it is a big question.
Let's dive in.
Well, it's interesting. When I first started my career, I thought I wanted to go into banking, and so I have a degree in finance, and did some internships and found out that I really hated that, and so was sort of questioning what I was going to do, and I ended up going into consulting, and that's when I started my career in software development. So I actually spent the first 5-6 years of my career in software development for a big consulting firm, and ended up learning how to manage and lead large projects for some fairly large hospitals. And that, sort of parlayed into some leadership and management roles, mainly in IT development, for about the first 20 years of my life, and spent, a good bit of time supporting operations from sales through service, through our network engineering, all through billing, and I just learned all aspects of our business. And I learned a lot about client support. And about a decade ago, my CEO said, "I'd like to apply your skills in operations." And so I moved over to the business side, and I haven't looked back.
Okay.
And I've used a lot of skills that I learned in development in my current
interesting.
role.
And so just going back a little, you said that you got into software development, and then you were running teams. Did you enter software development as a manager or as a developer?
As a developer.
Okay. And so how did you make that transition to running teams and so on?
Well, the way that I think everyone has their own personal journey. For me, I wasn't a very good developer. I was average at best. But I had an eye for design, architecture, and process development. And I had a unique skill of being able to translate business problems to technical teams. And so I think those two skills just naturally led me into a more communicative role. And that's when I ended up taking on small teams, then larger teams, then multifunctional teams. And it really was through my ability to translate business needs into technical specifications and vice versa. That really, I think, spurred my growth in leadership development. So I started out as a software developer and worked into team leads, and then ended up leading projects where people didn't actually report to me, but indirectly I had control of the project, and I just built those skills over time.
Okay. It's interesting that you mentioned business processes. As I've kind of grown up because I was a developer, and then the software that my wife and I we founded a company and launched the software, and it became successful, and I had to transition into being an executive. And one of the most valuable sort of areas that we focused our energy on was implementing business processes. And I mean, that's just been a game changer in so many areas for us, whether it's our site cleaning team or whatever. So I can see how that would immediately make you an attractive target for the C-suite.
Yeah.
Say, oh, you're good at that. We really value that.
Yeah. Well, I think, I think a big mistake that people make in technology is they focus on the technology for technology's sake, right? And really, if you're not solving a problem with technology,
for the
then
customer, right?
Right. Then what are, then there really is no intent or purpose behind it. And so, to me, you really should never start any kind of technology project if you haven't thought about the business problem you're trying to solve, and you really thought through not just the business process, but the people aspect of it and policies that you want to put in place. And once you've thought through all that, then you need to think about how you want to measure the outcomes. Then you can start talking about the technology, and oftentimes people get those backwards.
Yeah, agreed. See a lot of developers diving into a project they're really passionate about.
Yeah.
Sometimes it solves a problem for them, which can translate into solving a problem for the customer. But sometimes they're passionate about a new language, Go, for example, or a new platform that comes out, and they just want to do something with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes they get lucky and that translates into a solution for the customer,
yeah.
But often it doesn't, right?
Yeah, or it can create internal innovation, right? Solving problems for developers might mean more scale on a development team, or it could turn into a small product that you can productize for other developers or other companies that are having the same technical problem. But I find most of the time, if you're trying to build a business, grow a business, scale a business, make something viable commercially, that it has to be founded in your product and your process first.
So as you transitioned from being a developer into running a team, and then I guess being in more of a leadership role in the organization, did you find that you had to grow in certain ways?
Oh, in just about every way. I think leadership it's a journey, it's not a destination. And if you're not constantly growing and learning, every human being is different. Every human being has different motivators. And so I'm not the same person I was when I started my career. And most of that I owe to leadership development and the people that I've led. And I think as you go through, the leadership path, you have to find a way to motivate others to achieve a common goal through their talents and the aspects of their viewpoint that they bring to any initiative or any company. And so figuring out how you get work done through others it's a skill that you have to build and develop. It's, there are people that are born naturally to lead. I believe that's true. But I think a lot of it is nurtured as you build your career.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. And I love the way you described what leadership is. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about it, and maybe it's thanks to Hollywood or something like that, where leadership is, coercing people or dominating them somehow or something like that, and being the sort of hero character, but in fact you're kind of more of a servant, I think, enabling others and trying to do that in a way that doesn't interfere with them or who they are or their dynamic or the team dynamic. It's not what I expected either.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with being an authoritative leader, setting objectives and making sure those are clear and holding people accountable, but that doesn't equate to being a dictator, right? And in fact, sort of coercion is like the worst way to lead people to do other things. It works for a minute, but it won't work over the long term.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Do you ever read that study they did? Maybe it was at Harvard, or it was one of the Ivy League universities, where they were it was a psychological experiment, and they had a bunch of people lining up for this copy machine, and the copy machine generally, obviously this is back in the 80s or 90s or something, but the copy machine always had a long line, and they wanted to see if they could find an effective way to cut into the line. And so what they figured out eventually is that if someone cut into the line and said, I need to make copies because I'm late for class or something like that, if they gave a reason, then people would be more accepting of them cutting into the line. They had much more success. It significantly improved the success rate. And what they eventually figured out is it actually didn't matter what the reason was.
Yeah.
They could just say because the sky is blue, right?
It was
They would still let them in. You
Yeah.
know? That might seem a little bit manipulative, but I've always thought that the people that you're working with, and if you're in a leadership role, providing the rationale for the decisions and what one is doing, what the company is doing, why we're doing it, where we're going, and why we're going there has. I think that's very powerful, and I think it's something that a lot of leaders don't do. Maybe I don't know how many, but I suspect some don't do that, and I think that can lead to unhappiness and a level of detachment, not being invested in what the company is doing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Certainly, I think setting context is one of the most important things you can do in any situation, whether it's leading people, being married, raising children, right? I think setting context is hugely important, and it's not just what we're doing, but why we're doing it. And a lot of times people make the mistakes of telling people once, but you really have to continue to reiterate a message or in context in different mediums, different methods, but you have to do it consistently, and you have to be dedicated to it. I find, people really need three things, I think, in their job. One is they want to have meaning in their work, right? So they want to know that what they're doing matters and is meaningful towards a broader goal. If you're going to spend as much time as most of us spend working, you want to know that there's something meaningful tied to it. So that's where context comes in. I think the second thing people want is they want to know that the person they work for has their back. Right? If I do a good job, if I take some risks, do I work for someone I can depend on, or do I work for someone who's going to berate me and not value what I'm doing? Right? That makes a huge difference. So I think the second thing is people want to know that their direct supervisor and those above them are dependable. And then the third thing is they want to be, compensated fairly for the job they're doing. Mm-hmm. Everybody will tell you they want to make more money, but when people feel like I'm being paid fairly for the job I'm doing, then it's usually the other things that motivate them more.
Yeah, interesting. So how did you end up joining Liquid Web?
So I joined Liquid Web, it's been almost 4 years ago, and I joined with a group of folks that I've worked with for well over a decade. We were at another company called CBeyond, which is a very innovative company that our current CEO founded and took public, and we ended up selling that in 2014. And we had been partnered in the early days of CBeyond with a private equity company called Madison Dearborn, which is one of the premier private equity companies globally. And they're continuously looking at assets, particularly in the technology field, to add to their portfolio, and came across Liquid Web. And the original founder was looking to exit the business and go and do some new entrepreneurial things. And we ended up talking to them about becoming the new management team at Liquid Web. And so our CEO, Jim Geiger, our CTO, Joe Osterling, and myself formed a partnership, and we invested in the company. And with Madison Dearborn being the majority owner, we joined with them and became a management company in 2015.
Okay. That makes sense, because I saw this tremendous acceleration in Liquid Web starting at about that time, maybe 2016. I guess as you guys kind of ramped up, it just seemed like the brand was doing great things, and you guys were a player.
It's been an exciting time. The company's been around for 20 years now, and I think most folks think of us as a traditional hosting company, but when we entered the scene with Liquid Web, we had much grander visions. And because because we came in from outside the hosting industry and outside of Liquid Web, we're able to look at the company and the industry in new and innovative ways. Mm-hmm. And Liquid Web has been a great asset for us to build upon and really introduce some new and exciting things in the WordPress space, in the managed WooCommerce space. And so we're really aggressively moving into managed applications as opposed to only being traditional hosting.
Okay.
And because we're sort of newer on the scene in that area, we've been able to do some fun things that allow us to be a little bit more creative in our solutions. And we've, Liquid Web, we've almost doubled in size in the last 4 years through our organic efforts and through some acquisitions that we've done. And the good news about us is we're here to stay, and we believe we can be a real game changer in our
You have a lot
segment.
of passionate customers. we meet
do,
them,
yes.
and they love your service and so
Yeah.
on, and there seems to be a growing respect for the brand, so you're obviously doing good things.
Yeah, we're working hard at it. We like to say we're the most helpful humans in hosting, and our customers, we wouldn't be here without our customers, and even before Liquid Web, I think one of the things that makes our management team so tight is we fundamentally believe in a strategy of customer intimacy. And if you can provide support for your customers, but then do even more and help them grow, then it's such a win-win that it's not only the right thing to do, but it's fun. We have a lot of fun with our customers.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. So Liquid Web has all of you have your own data centers, right?
We do have a few of our own data centers, and we do some colo data centers as well.
Okay. And so you're not kind of heavily invested in Google Compute Cloud or AWS. And I know that some other hosting companies have kind of moved their infrastructure into those cloud systems. And I've been thinking about that difference between the way you're doing things and so on. And I guess as the years go by, 3 years out, let's say, do you think there's going to come a time where the economies of scale that AWS has are making it difficult for you to compete with companies that are using AWS because you're kind of doing everything yourself, and sure, you're a big hosting provider, but AWS is way bigger.
Yeah.
And what comes with you get a lot of stuff with AWS.
Yeah.
The software, the systems, the operational team, and so on. How do you see yourself competing with that?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
So we fundamentally believe that there are certain cases where you should be leveraging the hyperscale providers for solutions, particularly for some of our larger clients where we might do some kind of shared infrastructure. But we also fundamentally believe that in our segment, where we're looking at web creators, right, people who are doing creative things on the web and are in the small and mid-sized business, that if you have a company that is a partner with you all along the way, and we have our own infrastructure, our margins are so much stronger than a company that uses AWS or Google because they have huge fees that they have to pay. And so we have gotten super innovative and effective and efficient in managing our data centers and the density of our servers. And so we can very cost effectively continue to grow within the infrastructure that we have. And keeping our margins strong means that we have more to invest in support personnel. It means we have more to invest in our partner program for tools and automation. And it means we have more for product development.
Yeah.
And frankly, the way we compete is we're just going after web creators that want to work with a partner who may prefer to have technical support as opposed to having to do it all themselves and put all the pieces together.
Gotcha. I was chatting with my head of operations, Scott Bisker, about this yesterday, about exactly this, and Liquid Web versus other hosts that have moved over to AWS. And in fact, I think Automatic, don't quote me on this, but they've moved some of their stuff over to AWS as well. And that's where we ended up, is that you guys are relying on those margins to make you more competitive and be able to add more value to the customer. And to illustrate for our listeners and our viewers, I'm going to make some assumptions here, and you definitely don't need to divulge any technical aspects of your business, but if you're using AWS, you're being charged for transfer. In other words, per gigabyte transferred out of their data center, which can be very expensive. If you're in colo or you've got your own data center, you're usually paying using a system called 95th percentile, which is way cheaper. They just kind of average your bandwidth throughput. In other words, maybe you've got a commit of 400 megabits per second, which is a huge amount of data. It's like petabytes, I think, per month that you're transferring. But if you're buying it that way, it's way cheaper. And we were using Colo for a long time, and we've moved some of our stuff into AWS now. And one of the reasons we made that decision is because as we've grown, we were kind of a two-person show with just the two founders. And then we got we're about 40 people now, and our people are our biggest expense.
Right.
And so
power and people. That's what we.
Yeah. Did you say power and
power
people?
And people.
Right. And power, by power you mean watts.
Yeah.
Watts
power
consumed by servers.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. And we realized that our people were spending a lot of time having to manage our systems in Colo, and that using AWS we could save them time, and so save people hours, which are very expensive. And so we started going in that direction. Plus there were some capabilities there which were very interesting and that we didn't want to build ourselves. So yeah, kind of the same thought process on our side. Should we do Colo? Should we do? And we've ended up with a hybrid situation. We have some Colo and we have some AWS, and poking at Google's cloud as well and seeing what they've got, but we haven't deployed anything in there. So.
Well, I mean, traditional hosting can be a very capital-intensive business. And, so where you can find ways in your own data centers to make maximum use out of that. And that's part of why we love some of the products we have, like Cloud Sites, Managed WordPress, and Managed WooCommerce, is because we can really dial in on the density and the efficacy of the utilization of our space and power. And it becomes much less capital intensive on those platforms. So managed platform as opposed to managed hosting. And so that's really helping keep our costs in line, which again allows us to be more price competitive and continue to have real people on the phone that you can reach out to.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what's next for Liquid Web? What interesting things have you launched recently, or will you be launching?
So a couple things. I mean, your viewers probably are pretty familiar with our Managed WordPress product. We've got some really interesting features. We've recently launched multi-site, which some of our competitors have, but a lot of our clients, especially partners, have been asking for. We have some very large site deals, large site packages that we've launched. Where we are really focused on right now is our partnership with WooCommerce and the investments we're making in our managed WooCommerce hosting platform. We fundamentally believe that web creators out there won't just be building content and websites, but are going to be building stores. And the growth of WooCommerce is just astronomical. We've built just an industry-leading package on WooCommerce that we also provide our support for, that you can't find anywhere else in the industry. So I think you'll see us focus on store owners, store builders, and helping the broader web creator community get into building stores, whether those are freelancers or agencies or that need to broaden their portfolio and can build stores, build sites, set up a recurring revenue stream, and grow their business via our platforms. That's where you'll see us continue to grow.
Awesome. In terms of security, can you talk about that a little bit? How Liquid Web secures their customers?
Yeah, I think, first of all, we have a dedicated team of security experts, some homegrown, some that we've hired out of industry. We're 24/7, 365 with our security team, so people actually watching and monitoring our infrastructure. But we also look at it at every layer of security, right? So we have best-in-class physical security for our data centers, which of course is a big reason why you'd want to have a host or a managed platform so that you don't have to worry about that security. We have a whole suite of tools that manage our infrastructure and many custom capabilities that we've built in-house through our security experts that help keep our infrastructure and all of our servers secure. And then we obviously have a number of security products that we offer customers that come packaged or a la carte in our within our products and services. And in general, we're really trying to move towards utilizing a security framework for everything we do. The name is escaping me right now. I think it's NCIS, but that can't be right because that's the TV show. It'll come to me in a minute. But
it should be because it sounds cool.
It does sound cool, doesn't it?
Yeah, but
my security team's not going to be happy with me about that.
Yeah. And you acquired, I guess, the whole of iThemes.
We did.
Right, which includes iTheme Security.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's one of the products I mentioned. Yes, we have a number of Server Secure Plus is a product offering that we have that really focuses in on security, and I think you can't really be in this business without it being top of mind.
Yeah. I mean, it really is critical for anyone running, especially e-commerce websites, right?
Yeah, and it's so complex. I mean, I'm by far, not a security expert. What I can tell you is it's a mitigation and a risk management game. You're never going to be protected 100%. But when we think about our customers, right, they don't want to spend time thinking about how to make their site secure, right? So we do that for them. And it just requires such a focus and such specific understanding and intelligence in the security field. That you have to have a staff that knows what they're talking about, and you just have to build it into every product. So we don't launch a single product that hasn't gone through our full security process and automated scans and signs off directly from our director of security.
A problem that I've been contemplating, and this is stemmed from talking to end users of WordPress, is the plugin repository that has about 50,000 plugins. And they're written by whoever decides to write a plugin. Many of them don't go through QA, and most of them don't go through any kind of security audit. And they're available to anyone who's running WordPress. And so you are hosting those customers. They can sign into the WordPress installation, and they can install one of 50,000 plugins. And for a business owner, and my favorite example that I keep using is Chris and Katie Bayer, who run a coffee roastery up in Idlewild. I did an interview with them recently, and they have a website called Black Mountain Coffee.
Yeah.
And they just want to run their roastery and ship coffee beans to their members every month and so on. And they don't want to have to worry about security and hiring a developer and that kind of thing. And they actually ended up going with Squarespace.
Interesting.
And in thinking about that, I realized that those SaaS providers are taking their code through QA and through security audit, which is perhaps part of the QA process, and they hold themselves accountable for all the code that they make available. And sure, there's some disadvantages of using those platforms. You don't have the freedoms that WordPress provides. There's no portability between hosts because each of them is proprietary, and they try to lock you in. But there is that real advantage that you don't have this kind of Wild West situation where you've got all that code that is not made by Liquid Web if you're using your service, but made by whoever has decided to make it. Have you, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but I don't know if you've given that any thought, but I think it's a tough problem.
It is a very tough problem because, at some point, you want to leverage the democratization of technology and allow people to use what they want. But many, many times, some random plugin will cause significant problems, whether it's a security breach or just basic performance. And so we think about it in two ways. One way is if you're buying hosting from us and you're then putting WordPress on it and you're managing all the plugins yourself, what we've done is we've amassed a pretty strong set of plugins that we know are, have a better security path, or we've tested them. And we generally can recommend to our customers, hey, I see you're using plugin A. I really recommend if you want to do that, you need to use plugin B, and let me help you uninstall that plugin and reinstall this one, so that, because we know that it's a valid plugin and we've tested it, we've seen other customers use that. And if they choose not to and continue to get hacked or have problems or whatever, we sort of have some policies in place around managing that aspect of helping customers get clean when they don't want to get clean necessarily. The way we prefer to think about it going forward is that we package up a set of plugins that you would need for either your content or your commerce site, and we package that up for you. And not only is it taken through the QA process of those reputable developers, but we've taken it through our process as well.
Yeah.
And then, so we try to package all that up, and then we have a process that Chris Lemma, who has built, which if a client wants to use a plugin, we can evaluate that for them and either bring it onto our platform or figure out a way to make it, kind of secure and play nicely with our platform.
Yeah, I feel like that there's two ways to solve this, and maybe it needs both. And one of them is that the hosts do what you just described, and then the other is that perhaps the WordPress.org maintainers can provide more visibility into code quality, plugin security issues, that kind of thing. And there's some ongoing conversations about that at a very core part of the community. So, so yeah, I think that'll probably improve from both sides over time.
I think it has to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a dangerous world out there online.
Sure is.
And I think most people who are serious about running their business or building a business online, and certainly through WordPress, they may not know it when they start out, but as you get more experienced, most people are taking security more seriously, and they get to know what they can and can't use, and they get a little bit more gun shy about using unproven plugins and apps
for sure
out there.
For sure. Do you have any advice for folks that are at a point in their career kind of earlier than yours, perhaps say in a technical role, and they want to transition into more of a leadership role, and perhaps one day aspire to be in the C-suite?
In the C-suite, yeah. Well, I think a couple things. If you're in a technical role and you want to go into management and certainly into the C-suite, the first thing you need to make sure is that you really like people, right? Because leadership is all about working with people, relationships, and leading and managing others. And so everybody says, yes, I like people, but you have to really enjoy working with people, helping them develop their skill set and achieve their objectives in their careers. And if you don't have a passion about that, then leadership can be very draining. And so I think that's the first thing you really should think about before you move into a leadership role. And I think it's easier these days to have a very successful career on a senior technical path. In the old days, you had to go into management to make more money or get more benefits. But now, there's so many more opportunities to have a really strong career without going into management if that's not your passion. The second thing I would say is you have to learn the business. You have to spend time in the business. You have to talk to customers. You have to learn what the folks in finance are doing. You have to learn what the folks in marketing are doing. You have to learn what product development is about. And you have to learn financials, right? So if you're going to be a senior leader in an organization or you're going to be in the C-suite, you have to understand how the financials of your company work. You have to understand how you make money. You have to understand how you keep money. And you have to understand how to spend money very, very wisely. And so if you're in a business not to make money, that's a hobby, and I think that's awesome. But most businesses are in the green paper business, and so you got to buckle down and learn how the financial mechanisms work. I think you do those three things, and there's no reason why you can't build a really strong career in management and leadership. It also requires you to raise your hand a lot, and raise your hand to do things that you've never done before, and either fake it till you make it, or quickly get in, assess the situation, and solve problems. And the more you raise your hand, the more all the opportunities will open up. It's pretty simple, really.
Awesome. Well, Carrie, thank you so much for chatting with me.
I enjoyed it.
I know you're busy at WordCamp, and I appreciate you taking the time. It's been a wonderful conversation.
It's been great.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much to Carrie for chatting with me at WordCamp Atlanta. I really enjoyed the conversation. If you want to connect with Carrie, I recommend using LinkedIn, where you can connect with her as Carrie Wheeler. If you're watching this on YouTube, definitely like and subscribe. If you're listening via Apple Podcasts, we'd love it if you could leave us a review. Thanks very much, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye, everyone.